Did you know that the secret to mastering English isn't found in expensive courses or complicated textbooks? What if I told you that the most powerful English learning techniques are actually free, simple, and available to you right now? Imagine being able to speak, understand, and connect in English with a confidence you never thought possible. Today, I'm going to reveal the insider strategies that transformed not just my English skills, but also the lives of thousands of my students around the world. Have you ever felt frustrated with your English progress? Perhaps you've spent years studying grammar rules and memorizing vocabulary lists, only to freeze when it's time to actually speak. You're not alone. This is the experience of countless language learners who are trapped in traditional learning methods that simply don't work for real-world communication. But there's another way, a path that can transform your relationship with English forever. My own journey with language learning wasn't always smooth. There was a time when I felt completely lost, surrounded by unfamiliar sounds and incomprehensible words. The feeling of being unable to express even the simplest thoughts was overwhelming. But then something changed. I discovered a set of principles that completely transformed my approach to learning. These principles didn't just help me learn English. They made the process enjoyable, natural, and incredibly effective. The transformation wasn't immediate or magical. It was the result of consistent, purposeful practice using techniques that work with our brain's natural learning mechanisms, rather than against them. These are the techniques I'm going to share with you today, proven strategies that have helped thousands of students break through their language barriers and discover the joy of authentic communication in English. The most powerful insight I've gained from years of teaching and learning languages is this: language is not primarily an academic subject to be studied. It's a living, breathing tool for human connection. When we approach English with this mindset, focusing on communication rather than perfection, everything changes. Learning accelerates, confidence grows, and what once seemed impossible becomes not just possible, but natural. Let's start with what I believe is the foundation of successful language learning: listening. Have you ever noticed how babies learn their first language? They don't start by studying grammar rules or memorizing vocabulary lists. They begin by listening, absorbing the sounds, rhythms, and patterns of the language around them. This immersive listening phase creates the neural pathways that later enable speaking. As adult learners, we can harness this same powerful mechanism. When I was beginning my English journey, I made a commitment to surround myself with the language through listening. Every day, I would listen to stories, songs, podcasts, or even the news in English. At first, I understood very little, maybe just a word here and there. But I kept listening, not trying to understand everything, but simply allowing my brain to become familiar with the sounds and rhythms of English. Gradually, something remarkable happened. Words that had once seemed like an indistinguishable stream of sound began to separate into recognizable units. Phrases that had been meaningless noise started to carry meaning. My ear was becoming attuned to the language, and this happened not through concentrated study, but through consistent, relaxed exposure. This approach to listening isn't passive. It's about creating a relationship with the language. When you listen to English regularly, you're training your brain to recognize patterns, internalize grammatical structures, and build a mental database of vocabulary in context. All of this happens naturally, without the stress and frustration that often comes with traditional study methods. The beauty of learning through listening is that it fits seamlessly into your daily life. You can listen while commuting, exercising, cooking, or cleaning. You don't need to set aside special study time. You can transform your everyday activities into opportunities for language acquisition. This is how language learning becomes not an additional burden, but an enriching part of your normal routine. What should you listen to? The answer is simple: anything that interests you. If you enjoy stories, listen to audiobooks or podcasts with narratives. If you're interested in current events, find news broadcasts in English. If music is your passion, pay attention to English lyrics. The key is to choose content that engages you, because engagement is the catalyst for learning. I remember discovering a podcast about astronomy, a subject I've always found fascinating. Even though I understood only a fraction of what was said at first, I was motivated to keep listening because the topic itself captivated me. Over time, I found myself understanding more and more, not because I was studying harder, but because my interest propelled my learning forward. When you're starting out, don't worry about understanding everything. That's a common mistake that leads to frustration and discouragement. Instead, celebrate the words and phrases you do understand, and let the rest wash over you. Your brain is still processing this input, even when it doesn't translate to conscious comprehension. As your listening skills develop, you can gradually challenge yourself with more complex content, but always maintain a balance between material that stretches you and material that's comfortable. Both have value in your learning journey. Challenging content pushes your boundaries, while comfortable content builds fluency and confidence. Now, let's talk about the next crucial element of language learning: practice. There's a saying that practice makes perfect, but I prefer to say that practice makes progress. Perfection is an impossible and ultimately unhelpful goal in language learning. What matters is improvement, connection, and the ability to express yourself, even if imperfectly. When I was learning English, I made a commitment to practice speaking every day, even when there was no one to talk to. I would have conversations with myself, narrate my daily activities, or repeat phrases I'd heard in my listening practice. At first, this felt awkward and artificial, but soon it became a natural part of my routine. The key insight here is that speaking is a physical skill, not just a mental one. It involves coordinating the muscles of your mouth, tongue, and vocal cords in new, and sometimes unfamiliar ways. Like any physical skill, whether playing piano, dancing, or playing basketball, speaking a new language requires repetition to develop muscle memory and automaticity. Many language learners delay speaking until they feel ready, until they've mastered enough grammar or vocabulary to speak correctly. This is a fundamental mistake. Speaking is not the end product of language learning. It's an essential part of the learning process itself. When you speak, even with mistakes, you're strengthening neural pathways and building the physical capacity for fluent expression. Fear of making mistakes is perhaps the greatest barrier to speaking practice. I felt this fear intensely when I first started learning English. What if I said something wrong? What if people laughed at me or didn't understand? But I discovered something important. Mistakes are not failures, they're opportunities for growth. Every mistake provides feedback that helps your brain adjust and improve. Most language learners are far too harsh on themselves. They expect a level of perfection that even native speakers don't achieve. Native English speakers make grammatical errors, forget words, and sometimes struggle to express complex thoughts. The difference is that they don't let these imperfections stop them from communicating. They understand intuitively what many learners need to consciously embrace, that communication is about connection, not perfection. So how can you practice speaking, especially if you don't live in an English speaking environment or don't have regular access to conversation partners? There are many creative approaches. You can talk to yourself, describing your activities or environment in English. You can record yourself speaking and listen back to identify areas for improvement. You can read aloud from books or articles, focusing on pronunciation and rhythm. Technology has also created unprecedented opportunities for speaking practice. There are language exchange apps that connect learners around the world, online tutoring platforms with affordable conversation partners, and even AI conversation tools that can provide interactive speaking practice. With a little creativity and initiative, you can find numerous ways to practice speaking, regardless of your circumstances. When you practice speaking, focus on fluency before accuracy. Fluency means being able to express your thoughts smoothly and without excessive hesitation, even if you make grammatical errors or use imperfect vocabulary. Accuracy, speaking with correct grammar and precise word choice, will develop naturally over time through continued practice and exposure to the language. I used to set small, achievable speaking goals for myself. For example, I would try to speak for 1 minute without stopping about what I did that day, or I would practice explaining a simple concept like how to make a cup of tea. These focused exercises built my confidence and fluency in manageable increments, without the pressure of prolonged conversation. Another powerful approach to language learning is reading. Reading expands your vocabulary, reinforces grammatical patterns, exposes you to new ideas, and shows you how language is used in different contexts. It's a versatile and accessible form of language practice that can be tailored to any interest or proficiency level. When I was learning English, I started with very simple books, stories with pictures that helped me understand the meaning, even when I didn't know all the words. Children's books are perfect for this purpose. They use straightforward language, have engaging stories, and are often illustrated. Don't let pride keep you from materials that might seem too simple. The goal is comprehensible input that builds your skills step by step. I still vividly remember reading a simple story about a lost cat. The story itself was basic, but I was thrilled to be reading a complete book in English. I learned new words like whiskers, purr, and curious, words that weren't in my textbooks but are common in everyday English. More importantly, I saw how these words were used in context, which helped me understand not just their definitions, but how to use them naturally. As your reading skills develop, you can gradually move to more complex materials. Graded readers, books specifically designed for language learners at different levels, are an excellent bridge between children's books and authentic texts written for native speakers. These books use controlled vocabulary and grammar while still offering engaging content appropriate for adults. Eventually, you can progress to authentic materials like magazines, blogs, novels, or non-fiction books on topics that interest you. The transition might be challenging at first. You'll encounter more unfamiliar vocabulary and complex sentence structures, but this challenge is precisely what drives growth in your language skills. When reading in English, resist the urge to look up every unfamiliar word. This interrupts the flow of reading and can turn what should be an enjoyable activity into a tedious exercise. Instead, try to infer meaning from context and only look up words that appear repeatedly or seem essential to understanding the main ideas. Remember, even native speakers occasionally encounter words they don't know. The difference is that they don't let these gaps prevent them from comprehending and enjoying what they read. Reading aloud is a particularly valuable practice that combines the benefits of reading and speaking. When you read aloud, you're not just processing language visually, you're also engaging the physical mechanisms of speech and training your ear to connect written words with their spoken forms. This integrated practice strengthens multiple aspects of your language skills simultaneously. I used to set aside time each day to read aloud from books or articles. I would record myself and listen back, noting areas where my pronunciation or rhythm could improve. This practice not only enhanced my reading comprehension, but also made me more confident and fluent in spontaneous speaking situations. Now, let's explore another essential dimension of language learning: writing. Writing might seem less immediately necessary than speaking or listening, especially if your primary goal is verbal communication. But writing has unique benefits that make it an invaluable part of a comprehensive language learning approach. When you write, you have time to think about word choice, sentence structure, and grammar in a way that's not possible in the rapid flow of conversation. This deliberate practice helps solidify your knowledge of the language and gives you space to experiment with more complex expressions than you might attempt in speaking. I started my writing practice with very simple activities. I kept a daily journal where I would write a few sentences about my day, what I did, who I saw, how I felt. These short entries were often full of errors, but they provided regular, low-pressure writing practice that built my confidence and skills over time. As I progressed, I challenged myself with more complex writing tasks. I would write summaries of articles I had read or movies I had watched, express opinions on various topics, or compose letters, even if I didn't send them. Each of these activities pushed me to use different aspects of the language: narrative for summaries, persuasive language for opinions, formal structures for letters. One of the most helpful writing practices I discovered was keeping a vocabulary notebook. Whenever I encountered a new word or phrase that seemed useful, I would write it down along with its meaning and an example sentence. This not only helped me remember the new vocabulary, but also gave me practice using it in context. Writing also provides a concrete record of your language progress. When you look back at what you wrote months or years ago, you can see tangible evidence of how far you've come. This visible progress is incredibly motivating and can help sustain your enthusiasm during periods when improvement seems slow or imperceptible. If you're uncertain about your writing, there are many resources available for feedback and correction. Language exchange partners can review your writing, online tutors can provide guidance, and there are even AI-powered writing assistants that can suggest improvements. The key is to keep writing regularly, viewing mistakes as learning opportunities rather than failures. Another powerful tool in your language learning toolkit is watching videos in English. Videos combine audio and visual elements, providing contextual clues that make comprehension easier and more engaging. They expose you to the body language, facial expressions, and cultural contexts that accompany language in real-world use. When I was learning English, I found cartoons to be particularly helpful. The visual storytelling helped me understand the dialogue, and the simplified language and clear pronunciation were accessible even at my early stages of learning. I remember watching episodes of a cartoon about a dog. The humor transcended language barriers, making the learning experience enjoyable while still being instructive. As my skills improved, I progressed to sitcoms, movies, documentaries, and YouTube videos on topics that interested me. Each genre offered different benefits. Sitcoms showed conversational English and humor. Movies exposed me to diverse accents and speaking styles. Documentaries introduced specialized vocabulary. And YouTube videos connected me with current language use and internet culture. When watching videos for language learning, experiment with different approaches. Sometimes you might watch with subtitles in your native language to get the general meaning. Other times, use English subtitles to connect the spoken words with their written forms. And occasionally, challenge yourself to watch without any subtitles, focusing entirely on what you can understand from the audio and visual context. Don't be discouraged if you don't understand everything in a video. Like with listening practice, partial comprehension is valuable and will improve with consistent exposure. Focus on what you do understand and celebrate your progress as more and more of the language becomes accessible to you. Many language learners find it helpful to actively engage with video content rather than passively consuming it. You might pause periodically to summarize what you've understood, repeat particularly useful phrases, or write down new vocabulary. Some learners shadow the speakers, repeating their words with the same intonation and rhythm, a practice that develops both listening and speaking skills simultaneously. Talking with others who speak English is perhaps the most direct and effective way to improve your speaking skills. Conversation provides immediate feedback, requires real-time language processing, and creates an authentic context for using what you've learned. It also adds the human element of connection, which is both motivating and central to the purpose of language. When I was learning English, I was fortunate to have a friend who spoke the language well. We would talk regularly, and although I made many mistakes, she was patient and supportive. She would gently correct me when I made significant errors, but never in a way that interrupted the flow of conversation or made me feel self-conscious. If you don't have English speaking friends nearby, there are still many options for finding conversation partners. Language exchange platforms connect learners who want to practice each other's languages. Online tutoring services offer affordable conversation practice with native or fluent speakers. Community centers, libraries, or universities might host language conversation clubs. With a little research, you can find opportunities for speaking practice in almost any location. When practicing with conversation partners, it's helpful to have some topics or questions prepared in advance. This prevents awkward silences and ensures that you practice a range of vocabulary and structures. However, don't be too rigid with these preparations. Allow the conversation to flow naturally when possible, as this reflects real-world language use. Remember that the goal of conversation practice is communication, not perfection. Focus on expressing your ideas and understanding your partner, rather than worrying about every grammatical detail. Over time, your accuracy will improve naturally through this meaningful practice, without the anxiety that comes from excessive self-monitoring. One of the most important qualities for successful language learning is patience. Learning a new language is a marathon, not a sprint. It takes time for your brain to build the neural pathways that enable fluent comprehension and expression. There will be periods of rapid progress and periods where you seem to plateau. Both are normal parts of the learning process. I remember feeling discouraged when I couldn't understand a conversation or express a complex thought. But I learned to be patient with myself, to celebrate small victories, and to trust that consistent practice would eventually lead to progress. This patience was crucial for maintaining my motivation through the inevitable challenges of language learning. It's important to recognize that language learning is not linear. You might find that your listening skills improve rapidly while your speaking lags behind, or that you can read complex texts but struggle with simple conversations. This uneven development is completely normal and will balance out over time with continued practice. Patience also means allowing yourself to make mistakes without harsh self-judgment. Every language learner makes errors. They're an essential part of the learning process, providing feedback that helps your brain adjust and improve. When you approach mistakes with curiosity, rather than embarrassment, they become valuable learning opportunities rather than sources of discouragement. A dictionary can be a valuable tool in your language learning journey, but it's important to use it strategically. Many learners fall into the trap of looking up every unfamiliar word they encounter, which disrupts the flow of reading or listening and can make language activities feel tedious and fragmented. Instead, try to infer meaning from context whenever possible, and use your dictionary selectively for words that appear repeatedly or seem particularly important for understanding. This approach more closely mimics how we acquire vocabulary in our native language, primarily through context and repeated exposure. With occasional direct learning. When I was learning English, I carried a small dictionary with me and used it judiciously. When I encountered a new word that seemed useful, I would look it up and then immediately try to use it in a sentence of my own. This active engagement helped me remember the word better than simply noting its definition. Modern technology has vastly improved the dictionary experience for language learners. Mobile dictionary apps offer instant access to definitions, pronunciations, example sentences, and even images. Some apps allow you to save words to review later or organize them into thematic lists. These tools make it easier than ever to build your vocabulary efficiently and contextually. Learning through games is another effective approach that makes language acquisition more enjoyable and engaging. Games harness our brain's natural reward mechanisms, creating positive associations with language learning and enhancing motivation and retention. There are countless language learning games available, from classic word games like Scrabble or crossword puzzles, to specialized language learning apps with gamified elements. These games can help you practice vocabulary, grammar, reading, and even listening in a low-pressure, enjoyable context. I remember playing a word-finding game with friends while learning English. We had to find as many words as we could from a set of letters, competing to see who could identify the most. The game was fun and social, but it was also building my vocabulary and spelling skills without feeling like study or work. You can also create your own language learning games. For example, you might challenge yourself to spot and note down 5 new English words during your daily activities. Or play a personal word of the day game where you try to use a specific new word in different contexts throughout the day. These playful approaches make language learning feel like an adventure rather than a chore. One of the most powerful shifts you can make in your language learning journey is to begin thinking in English. When you first start learning a new language, it's natural to translate everything back and forth between your native language and English. This translation process is slow, cumbersome, and often leads to unnatural expressions that reflect the structure of your native language rather than authentic English. Thinking directly in English bypasses this translation step, allowing for more fluent and natural language use. It's a skill that develops gradually as you become more comfortable with the language, but you can actively encourage it through specific practices. I started practicing thinking in English by narrating my daily activities to myself in my head. While cooking, I would silently describe what I was doing. I'm cutting the onions now. Next, I'll add them to the pot. While walking to school or work, I would describe what I saw around me. There's a tall building on the right. The sky is cloudy today. This internal monologue felt strange at first, and I often had to pause to search for words. But with consistent practice, it became increasingly natural, until thinking in English was no longer a conscious effort, but something that happened automatically in certain contexts. Another way to develop the ability to think in English is to describe images or scenes without using your native language as an intermediary. Look at a photograph or scene around you and practice forming direct connections between what you see and English expressions, without the mental step of translation. Setting specific goals is another strategy that can significantly enhance your language learning progress. Goals provide direction and motivation, helping you focus your efforts and measure your improvement over time. Without clear goals, language learning can feel aimless and progress can be difficult to recognize. Effective language learning goals are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, what management experts call SMART goals, rather than a vague goal like improve my English. A SMART goal might be learn 20 new food-related words this week, or have a 5-minute conversation about my hobbies without major hesitations by the end of the month. I set small weekly goals when I was learning English. My first goal was to learn 10 new words each week, a modest target that felt achievable even with my busy schedule. As I progressed, my goals became more ambitious. Reading a short story without using a dictionary, having a 10-minute conversation with a native speaker, or writing a 1-page description of my hometown. Achieving these goals gave me a sense of accomplishment and tangible evidence of my progress. Even on days when language learning felt challenging, I could look back at the goals I'd already achieved and feel proud of how far I'd come. This sense of progress was crucial for maintaining my motivation through the inevitable ups and downs of language learning. It's important to balance stretch goals that push your boundaries with maintenance goals that reinforce what you've already learned. Language skills can atrophy if not regularly used, so including review and practice of previously learned material in your goals ensures that your knowledge base remains solid as you continue to build upon it. Regular review is indeed an essential component of effective language learning. Our brains naturally forget information that isn't reinforced through repetition, a phenomenon known as the forgetting curve. Strategic review counters this natural forgetting process, helping to transfer language knowledge from short-term to long-term memory. When I was learning English, I would set aside time each week to review what I had learned previously. I would read through my notes, revisit vocabulary lists, and practice using grammatical structures I had studied earlier. This regular review not only prevented forgetting, but also helped me see connections between different aspects of the language that weren't apparent when I first learned them. One effective review strategy is spaced repetition, revisiting material at increasingly longer intervals. For example, you might review new vocabulary the day after learning it, then 3 days later, then a week later, and so on. This approach is more efficient than massed practice, studying intensively in a single session, because it aligns with how our brains naturally form and strengthen memories. Many language learning apps now incorporate spaced repetition algorithms that automatically schedule review sessions at optimal intervals based on your performance. These tools can make the review process more efficient and effective, ensuring that you spend more time on challenging material and less time on what you already know well. Review doesn't have to be formal or time-consuming. You can incorporate it into your daily routine through quick activities like scanning a list of vocabulary while waiting for the bus, mentally reviewing grammar rules during your morning shower, or trying to use recently learned phrases in your conversations or writing. These brief but regular reinforcements can significantly enhance retention. Maintaining a positive attitude is perhaps one of the most underrated factors in successful language learning. Learning a new language inevitably involves challenges, moments of confusion, frustration, or self-doubt. How you respond to these challenges can substantially impact your progress and enjoyment of the learning process. When I faced difficulties in my English learning journey, I tried to reframe them as opportunities rather than obstacles. Each challenging conversation was a chance to practice real communication. Each confusing grammar rule was a puzzle to solve. Each unfamiliar word was a new tool for expression. This positive perspective helped me maintain enthusiasm and resilience, even when learning felt difficult. Research in psychology has demonstrated that our beliefs about learning significantly affect our outcomes. Those with a growth mindset, who believe that abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work, tend to achieve more than those with a fixed mindset, who believe that abilities are innate and unchangeable. Cultivating a growth mindset toward language learning can enhance your persistence, effort, and ultimately your success. Positive self-talk is a practical way to maintain an encouraging attitude. Notice when your internal dialogue becomes critical or discouraging, and consciously replace negative thoughts with more supportive ones. Instead of, "I'm terrible at pronunciation," try, "My pronunciation is improving with practice." Instead of, "I'll never be fluent," try, "I'm making progress every day." Even when it's not obvious. Celebrating your successes, however small, is another way to nurture a positive attitude. Did you understand a few more words in a conversation than you did last week? Did you successfully express a complex thought, even if imperfectly? Did you read a paragraph without needing to look up any words? These achievements deserve recognition and celebration. They're the building blocks of your growing language proficiency. Embracing mistakes as part of the learning process is a related mindset shift that can dramatically improve your language learning experience. Many learners view mistakes as embarrassing failures or evidence of inadequacy. This fear of making errors can become paralyzing, preventing the very practice that leads to improvement. When I was learning English, I made countless mistakes using the wrong verb tense, mispronouncing words, constructing sentences with awkward phrasing. But I learned to see these errors not as failures, but as valuable feedback that showed me where I needed to focus my attention. Each mistake was a signpost pointing toward my next area of growth. Most native speakers are far more understanding of language learners' errors than learners themselves imagine. They recognize the courage it takes to communicate in a new language and appreciate the effort, even when the execution isn't perfect. In fact, many find accents charming and small grammatical errors completely inconsequential to the overall communication. If you find yourself hesitating to speak or write because of fear of mistakes, try setting a different metric for success. Instead of aiming for error-free communication, aim for effective communication. Did you convey your meaning? Did you understand the response? Did the interaction move forward? These are the true measures of successful language use, not grammatical perfection. Viewing language learning as a journey rather than a destination can also transform your experience. Learning a language isn't something you complete or finish. It's an ongoing process of growth, discovery, and refinement. Even native speakers continue to learn new words, expressions, and styles throughout their lives. When I shifted from seeing English as a subject to master to seeing it as a journey to enjoy, my whole relationship with learning changed. I began to appreciate each new word, concept, or cultural insight as an enriching addition to my experience, rather than merely as progress toward some distant goal of fluency. This journey perspective encourages curiosity and openness. Instead of feeling frustrated by what you don't yet know, you can feel excited about all there is to discover. Each unfamiliar word becomes not an obstacle, but an opportunity to expand your understanding and expression. The journey of language learning also offers many unexpected pleasures beyond the practical ability to communicate. You gain insights into different ways of thinking, access to diverse perspectives and cultures, and a broader, more nuanced view of the world. These enriching aspects of language learning can sustain your motivation when progress on technical skills seems slow. Surrounding yourself with English is a powerful strategy for accelerating your learning and making it more natural and contextual. Language acquisition happens most effectively through immersion, consistent exposure to the language in meaningful contexts. While total immersion, living in an English-speaking country, isn't possible for everyone, you can create a mini-immersion environment regardless of your location. When I was learning English, I changed the language settings on my phone to English. At first, it was challenging to navigate menus and understand notifications, but I quickly adapted. Each interaction with my phone became a lesson in practical English vocabulary and phrases. This simple change transformed an everyday tool into a constant language learning resource. There are many other ways to surround yourself with English in daily life. You can label household items with their English names. Listen to English music during your commute. Follow English speaking accounts on social media, or set aside an English hour each day when you commit to using or engaging with only English. The key principle is to integrate English into your normal activities, rather than treating it as a separate subject that you study only during designated learning time. This integration makes language acquisition a natural, ongoing process rather than an isolated academic exercise. The power of repetition in language learning cannot be overstated. Our brains form and strengthen neural connections through repeated exposure and use. Each time you encounter or practice a word, phrase, or grammatical structure, the corresponding neural pathway becomes stronger and more efficient, leading to faster recall and more automatic use. The most effective repetition isn't mindless drilling, but varied, contextual exposure. Encountering a word in different sentences, situations, and forms helps your brain build a rich, flexible understanding of its meaning and use. Similarly, practicing a grammatical structure in various contexts helps develop an intuitive feel for how it functions in real communication. I found that repeating new words aloud helped cement them in my memory. When I learned a new word, I would say it multiple times, experimenting with the pronunciation and rhythm. This physical practice engaged multiple senses: hearing, feeling, and sometimes seeing the word, which created stronger memory traces than silent reading alone. Spaced repetition, revisiting material at increasing intervals, is particularly effective for long-term retention. Instead of cramming all your practice of a new concept into a single session, spread it out over days and weeks, with the intervals between practice sessions gradually increasing as your knowledge solidifies. While learning can sometimes feel like serious work, finding ways to make it fun significantly enhances both enjoyment and effectiveness. When learning is pleasurable, you're more likely to engage consistently and deeply, which naturally leads to better results. Additionally, positive emotions facilitate memory formation, making joyful learning experiences more likely to be retained. I discovered that singing songs in English was not only enjoyable, but also remarkably effective for language learning. Songs combine melody, rhythm, and repetition in a way that makes language patterns stick in your memory. I would often find myself spontaneously recalling lyrics, even when I wasn't consciously trying to remember them. Creating stories with new vocabulary is another playful approach that enhances learning. When I learned new words, I would challenge myself to create short, often silly stories that incorporated several of these words. These creative exercises were not only fun, but also provided meaningful context for the vocabulary, making it more memorable and usable. Games, as mentioned earlier, offer structured ways to make learning enjoyable. Whether traditional word games, language learning apps with gamified elements, or social language games played with friends or classmates, playful competition can transform practice from a chore into an engaging challenge. The key is to find approaches that you personally find enjoyable. Some learners thrive with social, interactive activities, while others prefer quiet, individual pursuits. Some respond to creative, open-ended tasks, while others prefer structured challenges with clear rules and objectives. Experiment with different methods to discover what makes learning feel like play rather than work for you. Using what you learn immediately and regularly is another principle that accelerates language acquisition. When you actively use a new word, phrase, or grammatical structure soon after learning it, you transform passive knowledge into active skill. This use it or lose it principle applies to all aspects of language learning: vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, and cultural knowledge. When I learned the word beautiful, I challenged myself to use it in various contexts throughout the day. I would describe the sky, flowers, buildings, or even my breakfast as beautiful. This deliberate practice helped me internalize not just the definition of the word, but also its appropriate contexts and collocations, the words it naturally pairs with in English. This approach turns everyday life into a language learning laboratory. Each new concept becomes not just something to memorize, but something to experiment with and incorporate into your active language use. This experimentation might feel awkward at first, but it rapidly accelerates the transition from conscious learning to automatic use. While consistent practice is crucial for progress, it's equally important not to rush or pressure yourself excessively. Language learning is not a race or competition, but a personal journey of growth. Pushing too hard can lead to stress, frustration, and ultimately diminished enjoyment and effectiveness. I learned to appreciate the value of slow, steady progress over time. Some days I would learn several new words or master a challenging grammatical concept. Other days, I might just maintain what I already knew without noticeable advancement. Both types of days were valuable parts of the overall learning process. This patient approach aligns with how our brains naturally develop new skills. Cognitive science shows that learning often involves periods of apparent plateau followed by sudden improvements. During these plateaus, your brain is consolidating knowledge and preparing for the next leap forward, even when progress isn't visible. Trusting this process and continuing consistent practice, without anxious pushing, often yields the best long-term results. Keeping a journal in English combines several powerful learning principles: regular writing practice, personal expression, and a tangible record of your progress. A language journal doesn't need to be elaborate or time-consuming. Even a few sentences each day can provide valuable practice and create a meaningful record of your journey. When I kept an English journal, I started with very simple entries, just a few sentences about my day, my thoughts, or my plans. These early entries were full of errors and had limited vocabulary. But as I continued the practice, my sentences gradually became longer and more complex, my vocabulary expanded, and my grammatical accuracy improved. Looking back at earlier entries provided concrete evidence of my progress. On days when I felt discouraged or questioned whether I was improving, these tangible comparisons showed how far I had come. This visible growth was powerfully motivating and helped sustain my commitment through challenging periods. Your journal can take many forms depending on your preferences. You might write about your daily experiences, respond to prompts or questions, reflect on your language learning process, or even create fictional stories or dialogues. The key is consistent practice and self-expression, not adhering to any particular format or standard. Don't worry about perfect grammar or sophisticated vocabulary in your journal. The primary purpose is practice and self-expression, not creating a polished final product. Allow yourself to experiment, make mistakes, and gradually develop your written voice in English. This low-pressure, personal writing space is ideal for building fluency and confidence. Asking questions is a powerful learning strategy that many students underutilize. Questions reveal what you don't understand, guide you toward the information you need, and demonstrate your engagement with the learning process. In language learning, questions help clarify confusion, deepen understanding, and expand your knowledge in personally relevant directions. I was always curious when learning English and asked many questions about word meanings, pronunciation, grammar rules, and cultural contexts. These questions helped me fill gaps in my understanding and prevented small confusions from becoming major obstacles. More importantly, they reflected and reinforced my active engagement with the language rather than passive reception. There are no silly questions when it comes to language learning. What might seem like a simple or obvious question to someone else could be an important point of clarification for you. Each learner has unique backgrounds, perspectives, and learning needs, which naturally lead to different questions and areas of confusion. If you're studying with a teacher or tutor, don't hesitate to ask when something isn't clear. Most educators appreciate questions as they provide valuable feedback about what students are understanding and where they need additional support. Your questions help them teach more effectively while helping you learn more thoroughly. Even when studying independently, you can engage with questioning. Ask yourself questions about what you're reading or listening to. Why is this word used here instead of a synonym I know? How would this sentence change if it were in a different tense? What does this idiom literally mean, and how is it used figuratively? These self-directed questions promote deeper processing and more complete understanding. When learning becomes challenging or frustrating, it's important to recognize when to take a break. Mental fatigue is real in language learning. Your brain is forming new neural pathways, which requires significant cognitive energy. Pushing too hard without adequate rest can lead to diminishing returns and even burnout. I learned to recognize signs that I needed a break: increased error rates, difficulty concentrating, or feeling unusually frustrated with normal challenges. When these signs appeared, I would step away from active studying and do something completely different, perhaps physical activity, creative pursuits, or simply rest. Afterward, I would return to learning with renewed focus and energy. These breaks aren't wasted time. They're an essential part of the learning process. During rest periods, your brain continues to process and consolidate what you've learned, often making connections that weren't apparent during active study. Many learners experience ha moments after a break, when concepts that were previously confusing suddenly make sense. The optimal balance between study and rest varies between individuals. Some learners thrive with longer, less frequent study sessions, while others prefer shorter, more frequent engagement. Experiment to discover your personal rhythm and honor your need for both dedicated practice and rejuvenating breaks. Celebrating your progress, however small, is another crucial aspect of successful language learning. Our brains are wired to respond to rewards and recognition, which release dopamine and other neurochemicals that enhance motivation, memory formation, and positive associations with learning activities. When I achieved a language learning goal, whether mastering a difficult sound, finishing a book, or having a successful conversation, I would take time to acknowledge and celebrate that achievement. Sometimes the celebration was as simple as mentally congratulating myself. Other times, I might treat myself to a small reward like a favorite snack or an episode of a show I enjoyed. These celebrations serve multiple purposes. They provide immediate positive reinforcement that strengthens the neural pathways involved in the learning that preceded them. They create tangible milestones that mark your progress over time. And they associate language learning with positive emotions, which increases your motivation to continue practicing and improving. The most effective celebrations acknowledge specific achievements rather than vague progress. Instead of thinking, "I'm getting better at English," celebrate concrete accomplishments. "I successfully ordered food in English today," or "I finished reading my first English novel," or "I understood most of that podcast without needing to look up any words." These specific recognitions make your progress tangible and meaningful. Learning with others can significantly enhance your language acquisition in ways that independent study cannot. Group learning provides social motivation, diverse perspectives, varied speaking partners, immediate feedback, and often a more enjoyable and engaging experience. I studied with a friend who was also learning English, and our weekly study sessions became something I looked forward to rather than a chore. We would help each other understand difficult concepts, practice conversation, quiz each other on vocabulary, and celebrate each other's progress. This shared journey made the process more enjoyable and sustainable. Finding a study partner or group doesn't have to be difficult. Language learning classes, online forums, social media groups, or language exchange apps can connect you with others at similar proficiency levels or with complementary language goals. Local libraries, community centers, or universities might also host language learning clubs or conversation groups. Even if you primarily study independently, occasional group learning experiences can provide valuable perspective and motivation. Participating in a conversation club once a month, joining an online discussion forum, or even finding a language accountability partner with whom you share goals and progress can supplement your individual practice with social learning benefits. The effectiveness of group learning depends largely on the dynamics and composition of the group. Ideally, members should have similar proficiency levels or learning goals, a supportive and non-judgmental attitude, and a shared commitment to using English during group activities. A mix of personalities and learning styles can be beneficial, bringing diverse perspectives and approaches to the learning experience. Listening to yourself as you speak or read English is a practice that many learners overlook, yet it provides unique insights and opportunities for improvement. When you listen attentively to your own speech, you can identify pronunciation issues, unnatural rhythm or intonation, hesitations, and other aspects of spoken language that might otherwise go unnoticed. I regularly recorded myself reading aloud or speaking spontaneously in English, then listened to these recordings with critical attention. At first, it felt strange and even uncomfortable to hear my own voice speaking a foreign language. But this practice quickly revealed patterns in my speech that needed improvement, sounds I consistently mispronounced, words I tended to stress incorrectly, or grammatical errors that had become habitual. Modern technology makes this practice easier than ever. Smartphones have recording capabilities that allow you to capture your speech anywhere, anytime. Voice memo apps, language learning apps with recording features, or dedicated pronunciation apps provide specialized tools for this purpose. Some advanced applications even offer automated feedback on pronunciation, comparing your speech to native speaker models. When listening to your recordings, focus on one aspect of speech at a time rather than trying to evaluate everything simultaneously. You might first listen for pronunciation of specific sounds, then for rhythm and stress patterns, then for grammatical accuracy. This focused attention allows for more detailed observation and targeted improvement. Comparing your speech to native speaker models can be instructive, but be cautious about setting unrealistic expectations. The goal for most language learners is not to sound indistinguishable from a native speaker, but to communicate clearly and effectively. Focus on aspects of pronunciation that most affect comprehensibility rather than pursuing a perfect accent. Avoiding comparison with other learners is another important principle for maintaining motivation and a healthy perspective on your language learning journey. Each person brings different backgrounds, aptitudes, learning styles, time availability, and goals to the language learning process. These differences make direct comparisons not just unhelpful but potentially misleading and discouraging. I sometimes found myself comparing my progress with that of other English learners and feeling inadequate when others seemed to advance more quickly. But I gradually realized that these comparisons weren't meaningful or productive. Some learners had advantages I didn't, perhaps previous exposure to similar languages, more time to practice, or access to immersive environments. Others might progress quickly in some aspects of language, but struggle with areas where I excelled. More importantly, I came to understand that language learning is not a competition but a personal journey of growth. The only meaningful comparison is with your past self. Are you more proficient now than you were a month ago? Have you expanded your vocabulary, improved your pronunciation, or gained confidence in speaking? These self-referential measures of progress are far more relevant than how you compare to someone else. If you find yourself habitually making discouraging comparisons, try shifting your perspective. View other learners not as competitors, but as fellow travelers and potential resources. Those who are more advanced in certain areas can offer guidance and inspiration. Those who struggle with aspects you find easy might benefit from your support. This collaborative mindset transforms the language learning community from a source of comparison to a network of mutual support. Being creative in your language learning approach can significantly enhance both enjoyment and effectiveness. Traditional study methods, vocabulary lists, grammar exercises, and structured lessons certainly have their place, but creative approaches engage different parts of your brain, form more memorable associations, and often make learning more personally meaningful and engaging. Drawing pictures to represent new vocabulary creates visual associations that can make words more memorable. These don't have to be artistic masterpieces. Even simple sketches establish connections between the word and its meaning without relying on translation, which helps develop direct thinking in English. I found that writing short poems or songs using new vocabulary was both enjoyable and effective for retention. The constraints of poetic form or musical rhythm required me to play with the language creatively, exploring how words fit together and developing a feel for their natural flow and combinations. Even simple rhyming couplets or short verses set to familiar tunes created strong memory hooks for new words and phrases. Role-playing scenarios in English, either with partners or even by yourself, adds a creative, imaginative dimension to language practice. Pretending to be different characters in various situations challenges you to adapt your language use to different contexts, registers, and purposes. This play-acting builds flexibility and confidence while making practice more engaging. Creating stories that incorporate new vocabulary or grammatical structures provides contextual practice that's more meaningful than isolated exercises. When you construct a narrative, even a simple or silly one, you're using language for its core purpose: to communicate ideas and experiences. This authentic use creates stronger neural connections than mechanical drills or memorization. Staying organized in your language learning efforts can significantly impact your progress and consistency. Organization doesn't mean rigid scheduling or bureaucratic systems. Rather, it's about creating structure that helps you use your learning time efficiently and maintain awareness of your progress and goals. When I was learning English, I kept all my notes in a dedicated folder, organized by topic or skill area. This simple system made it easy to find specific information when I needed it, and to review related concepts together. It also gave me a tangible record of everything I had studied, which provided a satisfying sense of accomplishment as the folder grew thicker over time. Creating lists of words or phrases you want to learn, and checking them off as you master them, provides both direction and a visible record of progress. These lists can be organized thematically as foods, travel vocabulary, business terms, by part of speech, verbs, adjectives, prepositions, or by priority based on your specific learning goals and needs. Setting a consistent schedule for different types of practice helps ensure balanced development of all language skills. You might designate certain days for focusing on particular skills, perhaps Monday for vocabulary building, Tuesday for reading practice, Wednesday for listening exercises, and so on. Or you might aim to include multiple skill areas in each study session, allocating specific time periods to each. Digital tools can significantly enhance your organizational systems. Language learning apps often include progress tracking features. Note-taking apps allow for flexible organization and easy searching of your learning materials. Calendar apps help maintain consistent practice schedules. Cloud storage ensures your materials are accessible across devices and protected from loss. The most effective organizational system is one that you'll actually use consistently. It should be simple enough to maintain without becoming a burden, yet comprehensive enough to support your learning goals. Experiment with different approaches to find what works best for your learning style, schedule, and preferences. Consistency is perhaps the single most important factor in successful language learning. Regular, sustained practice, even in small doses, yields far better results than occasional intensive study sessions followed by long gaps. Consistency builds and maintains neural pathways, prevents forgetting, and gradually transforms conscious effort into automatic skill. I made it a priority to engage with English every day, even if only for a few minutes. Some days I might study intensively for an hour or more. Other days, perhaps just 10 minutes of vocabulary review or listening practice while commuting. This daily contact with the language maintained my momentum and prevented the regression that often occurs with irregular practice. Establishing language learning as a habit, integrated into your daily routine, makes consistency much easier to maintain. Attach your practice to existing habits, perhaps reviewing vocabulary while having morning coffee, listening to English podcasts during your commute, or writing in your English journal before bed. These associations create natural triggers for your language practice, reducing the willpower required to maintain consistency. Start with a manageable commitment that you're confident you can maintain, even on your busiest days. It's better to consistently practice for 5 minutes daily than to aim for hour-long sessions that you frequently skip due to time constraints. As the habit becomes established, you can gradually increase the duration or complexity of your practice. Tracking your consistency can provide motivation and accountability. A simple calendar where you mark each day you practice, a habit tracking app, or a language learning app that records your streak of consecutive days creates a visual record of your commitment. Many learners find that maintaining an unbroken chain of practice days becomes a powerful motivator in itself. If you miss a day, which happens to everyone occasionally, don't let it derail your overall consistency. The never miss twice rule is helpful here. If you miss one day, make a particular effort to practice the next day, preventing a single lapse from becoming a pattern of inconsistency. This resilient approach acknowledges human imperfection while maintaining your overall commitment to regular practice. Being kind to yourself throughout the language learning process is not just a matter of emotional well-being but also a practical strategy for long-term success. Learning a new language involves vulnerability, making mistakes, and sometimes feeling incompetent despite being intelligent and capable in other areas of life. Self-compassion creates a psychological environment where these challenges become opportunities for growth rather than sources of discouragement. I learned to speak to myself with the same kindness and encouragement I would offer to a friend who was learning a new skill. When I made mistakes or struggled to understand something, I would remind myself that this was a normal part of the learning process, not a reflection of my intelligence or potential for success. This self-compassionate approach helped me maintain motivation through the inevitable challenges of language learning. Recognize that learning curves are rarely smooth or predictable. You'll have days of remarkable clarity and progress, and other days when even familiar material seems confusing. These fluctuations are normal and experienced by all learners, regardless of their aptitude or dedication. Allowing for this natural variation, without harsh self-judgment during difficult periods, sustains your learning momentum over time. Self-kindness includes setting realistic expectations based on your particular circumstances. If you're learning English while working full-time raising children, or managing other significant responsibilities, your progress will naturally differ from someone with more available time for study. Acknowledge the constraints you're working within and celebrate your progress within that context, rather than comparing yourself to idealized standards. Remember that making mistakes is not just inevitable, but essential for learning. When you approach errors with curiosity, rather than embarrassment or self-criticism, they become valuable feedback that guides your improvement. This growth-oriented perspective transforms mistakes from failures to be avoided into necessary steps on the path to proficiency. Using flashcards is a time-tested and scientifically supported method for vocabulary acquisition and retention. Flashcards leverage the testing effect, the finding that actively retrieving information from memory strengthens learning more effectively than passive review. They also facilitate spaced repetition, allowing you to focus more practice on challenging items while spending less time on words you've already mastered. When I was learning English, I created simple flashcards with the English word or phrase on one side and its meaning, sometimes in my native language, sometimes as an English definition or image on the other. I carried these cards with me everywhere, using spare moments throughout the day for quick review sessions. Modern digital flashcard apps offer enhanced functionality over traditional paper cards. They can automatically implement spaced repetition algorithms, incorporate multimedia elements like images and audio, and synchronize across devices, so your study materials are always accessible. Many apps also allow you to create cards from words you encounter in reading or listening, integrating vocabulary building with authentic language exposure. For maximum effectiveness, create flashcards that include not just isolated words, but also context and usage examples. Instead of simply writing, "delighted" on one side and its definition on the other, include a sample sentence. "I was delighted to receive your invitation." This approach helps you learn not just what words mean, but how they're typically used in natural speech and writing. Review your flashcards in both directions to build both recognition and production skills. Traditional review, seeing the English word and recalling its meaning, helps with comprehension. Reverse reviews, seeing the meaning and producing the English word, helps with speaking and writing. Both directions are valuable for developing well-rounded vocabulary knowledge. Immersing yourself in English as much as possible accelerates your learning by creating a language environment that mimics natural acquisition. While complete immersion, living in an English-speaking country, provides the most intensive exposure, partial immersion strategies can create significant benefits, regardless of your location or circumstances. I tried to make English a natural part of my daily life, rather than something I only engaged with during designated study time. I thought in English when possible, spoke to myself in English while doing routine activities, and wrote shopping lists or notes to myself in English. These small practices integrated the language into my everyday experience, rather than keeping it separate as an academic subject. The goal of immersion is to make English a normal, comfortable part of your life, rather than a foreign element that feels strange or intimidating. As you consistently expose yourself to the language in various contexts, your brain adapts, gradually processing English more automatically and naturally. Technology makes partial immersion more accessible than ever before. You can change the language settings on your devices, follow English speaking social media accounts related to your interests, listen to English music or podcasts throughout the day, or use English language apps for everyday activities like cooking, fitness, or navigation. These choices create multiple touch points with the language throughout your day. Even if complete immersion isn't possible, you can create immersion islands, specific times or contexts where you use only English. Perhaps Saturday mornings are your English time, or your hobby-related activities are conducted entirely in English. These designated immersion periods provide concentrated practice while fitting realistically into your broader life context. Cultivating curiosity about English enhances both the enjoyment and effectiveness of your learning. Curiosity, a genuine interest in discovering how the language works, where words come from, why expressions mean what they do, transforms language learning from mechanical memorization into an engaging exploration. This inquisitive approach not only makes learning more enjoyable, but also creates stronger, more elaborate neural connections that enhance retention and recall. I approached English with a sense of fascination and wonder, constantly asking questions about etymologies, idioms, cultural references, and usage patterns. This curiosity led me down interesting paths of discovery, connecting language learning with history, culture, psychology, and other areas of knowledge that enriched my understanding and made the learning process more engaging. Curiosity naturally leads to deeper processing of language. Instead of simply accepting that an expression like, "It's raining cats and dogs," means, "It's raining heavily," you might wonder how this strange idiom originated, which leads to learning about its possible historical origins and similar expressions in other languages. This elaboration creates multiple mental hooks for remembering both the expression and its meaning. Following your curiosity often leads to personally meaningful learning that's more motivating and memorable than prescribed curricula. If you're interested in cooking, exploring English vocabulary related to food and culinary techniques connects language learning with an existing passion. If you're fascinated by a particular historical period, reading about it in English combines language practice with engaging content. Encourage your natural curiosity by asking questions as you encounter new aspects of English. Why is this phrase used this way? How does this grammar rule work? When would a native speaker use this expression versus a similar one? Is this word used differently in different English-speaking countries? These questions guide you toward deeper understanding and more nuanced language use. Regularly reviewing your language learning goals ensures that your practice remains aligned with your evolving needs, interests, and priorities. As you progress, your initial goals may be achieved, your understanding of what's possible may expand, or your reasons for learning English may shift. Periodic goal review helps you adapt your learning approach to these changes, maintaining relevance and motivation. When I was learning English, I would evaluate my goals monthly, considering what I had accomplished, what challenges remained, and whether my priorities had changed. Sometimes I would realize that a goal had become too easy and needed to be made more challenging. Other times, I might recognize that a goal was more ambitious than I had initially understood and required breaking down into smaller steps. This regular review process helps prevent both stagnation and frustration. Without periodic reassessment, you might continue working toward goals that you've already achieved or that no longer align with your needs, missing opportunities for new challenges and growth. Alternatively, you might persist with goals that have proven unrealistic given your current circumstances, creating unnecessary stress and discouragement. The review process itself can be simple. Set aside time periodically, perhaps monthly or quarterly, to reflect on questions like, what progress have I made toward my current goals? Do these goals still reflect what's most important in my language learning? What new goals might better serve my current needs and interests? What obstacles have I encountered, and how might I address them more effectively? As you review your goals, maintain a balance between stability and flexibility. Constantly changing directions prevents the focused practice needed for skill development, but rigidly adhering to initial goals, regardless of changing circumstances, can be equally counterproductive. The ideal approach combines consistent effort toward core priorities with thoughtful adaptation to new insights and changing needs. Using online resources exponentially expands your language learning opportunities, providing access to authentic materials, structured learning programs, interactive practice, and global language communities, regardless of your geographical location. The Internet has democratized language learning, making high-quality resources available to anyone with basic connectivity. I utilized a variety of online resources to supplement my English learning. I watched instructional videos, took interactive quizzes, played language learning games, and participated in forums where learners and native speakers discussed language questions. These diverse resources added depth, variety, and enjoyment to my learning experience. The most effective approach to online resources combines structure with exploration. Structured resources like language learning apps, online courses, or digital textbooks provide systematic progression and comprehensive coverage. Exploratory resources like authentic videos, articles, or social media allow you to follow your interests and encounter language in natural contexts. Together, these complementary approaches build both foundational knowledge and practical usage skills. When selecting online resources, consider your personal learning style and preferences. Visual learners might benefit most from video-based instruction or infographics explaining grammar concepts. Auditory learners might prefer podcasts or audio lessons. Interactive learners often thrive with apps that incorporate games, quizzes, or virtual dialogue practice. Matching resources to your learning style enhances both enjoyment and effectiveness. The abundance of online resources can sometimes feel overwhelming. Rather than trying to use everything available, select a core set of resources that complement each other and align with your goals. perhaps a primary app for structured practice, a podcast for listening skills, a language exchange platform for conversation practice, and a few websites or channels related to your personal interests. This focused approach prevents the paralysis that can come from too many options. Learning about English. Speaking cultures enriches your language acquisition in multiple ways. Language and culture are deeply intertwined. Idioms, humor, communication styles, and even grammar reflect cultural values and historical developments. Understanding these cultural dimensions helps you use the language not just correctly, but appropriately and authentically. I found that learning about holidays, traditions, and everyday customs in English speaking countries helped me understand contextual references that appeared in conversations, media, and literature. For example, understanding the significance of Thanksgiving in American culture helped me grasp related vocabulary and expressions that would otherwise have been confusing or meaningless. Cultural knowledge also provides insight into communication styles and social norms that affect language use. Different English speaking cultures have varying approaches to directness, formality, humor, personal space, and many other aspects of interaction. Awareness of these patterns helps you navigate social situations effectively and avoid unintended miscommunications or offense. Engaging with cultural products, books, films, music, art. Food from English speaking regions creates natural contexts for language learning while also deepening your understanding and appreciation of the cultures. These authentic materials reflect real language use and provide rich context for vocabulary and expressions you might not encounter in language textbooks. Remember that English-speaking cultures are tremendously diverse, spanning multiple continents and countless distinct communities. While it's impossible to become an expert in all these cultural variations, developing a curious and respectful awareness of this diversity enriches your language learning and intercultural competence. Maintaining motivation throughout your language learning journey is essential for long-term success. Learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint, and sustaining your engagement over months and years requires strategies for managing the inevitable fluctuations in enthusiasm and progress. I discovered that connecting my language learning to meaningful personal goals helped maintain my motivation, even during challenging periods. When I clearly understood why English mattered to me for career opportunities, travel experiences, access to specific knowledge, or meaningful connections with others, I could remind myself of these larger purposes. When my immediate motivation wavered, finding sources of enjoyment in the learning process itself creates intrinsic motivation that's more sustainable than external pressure or vague notions of should. Whether you find pleasure in the mental challenge, the cultural insights, the social connections, or the sense of accomplishment, identifying and emphasizing these enjoyable aspects helps maintain your engagement over time. Tracking your progress provides tangible evidence of growth that can be powerfully motivating. Whether through formal assessments, personal journals, recording samples of your speaking or writing, or simply noting when you successfully use English in new contexts, creating a record of your improvement reminds you that your efforts are producing results, even when progress feels slow. Community support significantly enhances motivation by providing encouragement, accountability, and shared experience. Whether in person or online, connecting with others who are also learning English creates a sense of belonging and mutual support that helps sustain motivation through challenges. These communities might be formal classes, informal study groups, online forums, or language exchange partnerships. Variety in your learning activities prevents boredom and maintains engagement. If you find your motivation flagging with a particular approach or resource, try something different, a new app, a different type of content, or a novel practice technique. This refreshes your interest while still advancing your overall language goals. Patience with yourself and the learning process is perhaps the most fundamental attitude for successful language acquisition. Learning a new language, especially as an adult, is a complex neural and psychological undertaking that unfolds gradually over time. Unrealistic expectations about the pace or linearity of progress can lead to frustration and diminished motivation. I learned to appreciate that language development follows its own timeline, with periods of apparent plateau, when your brain is consolidating knowledge, followed by sudden breakthroughs. Understanding this natural pattern helped me maintain confidence and consistent practice even when visible progress seemed slow. Patience doesn't mean passive waiting, but rather active engagement without anxious rushing. It means continuing to practice regularly while trusting that your brain is processing and integrating what you're learning, even when the results aren't immediately apparent. This trust in the process allows for more relaxed, effective learning. Different aspects of language develop at different rates for different learners. You might find that your listening comprehension advances quickly while your speaking fluency lags behind, or that your reading vocabulary grows rapidly while pronunciation remains challenging. Patience includes accepting these natural variations in your development rather than expecting perfectly balanced progress across all skills. Remember that even native speakers took years to develop fluency in their first language, with plenty of mistakes and confusion along the way. As an adult learner, you benefit from more advanced cognitive abilities and learning strategies, but the fundamental process of language acquisition still requires time and countless hours of exposure and practice. Embracing this reality with patience, rather than frustration, creates a sustainable approach to long-term language development. Listening to different English accents enhances your real-world comprehension abilities. English is spoken as a first language in many countries, including the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa, each with distinctive pronunciation patterns, vocabulary, and expressions. Additionally, it's used as a second language around the world, with speakers bringing influences from their native languages into their English pronunciation. I made a point of exposing myself to diverse English accents through movies, TV shows, podcasts, and online videos. At first, unfamiliar accents were challenging to understand, but with regular exposure, my ear became more flexible. This practice prepared me for the reality of global English use, where I would encounter many different pronunciation patterns. Begin by exploring major accent variations, perhaps comparing American, British, and Australian English in news broadcasts or documentaries where the speech is relatively clear and formal. As your ear becomes more attuned to these differences, you can gradually explore more regionally specific accents or less formal speech styles. Remember that the goal isn't to master every possible accent, but to develop sufficient flexibility to understand diverse English speakers in real-world contexts. Focus first on comprehension rather than production. Being able to understand different accents is generally more important than being able to imitate them. unless you have specific reasons for wanting to adopt a particular accent yourself. Using English in real situations, even brief, simple interactions, provides unique benefits that can't be replicated through study alone. Real communication has urgency, purpose, and emotional engagement that dramatically enhance learning and retention. It also builds confidence through successful, authentic experiences rather than theoretical knowledge. When I traveled to places where English was spoken, I challenged myself to use the language for practical purposes, asking for directions, ordering food, making small talk with locals. Even these brief exchanges were powerful learning experiences that connected classroom knowledge with real-world communication. If travel to English-speaking regions isn't currently possible, look for opportunities in your local environment. Perhaps there are international students, tourists, or expatriates in your community with whom you could practice. Many cities have international meetings or language exchange events specifically designed for cross-cultural conversation practice. Online platforms now provide countless opportunities for authentic English communication without geographical limitations. Video chat with language exchange partners, participate in interest-based forums or social media groups. Join multiplayer games with English-speaking players, or attend virtual events or classes conducted in English. These digital interactions offer real communication practice from anywhere with internet access. Start with brief, structured interactions where you can prepare in advance if real-time communication feels intimidating. Perhaps making a specific purchase, asking for particular information, or discussing a topic you've thought about beforehand. As your confidence grows, you can gradually engage in more spontaneous, extended conversations, remaining open to learning new aspects of English throughout your journey ensures continued growth and prevents stagnation. Language is not a fixed body of knowledge that can be completely mastered and checked off. It's a living, evolving system that continually develops new words, expressions, and usage patterns. This ongoing evolution creates endless opportunities for discovery and growth. I maintained a learner's mindset, even as my English proficiency increased, remaining curious about unfamiliar words, alternative expressions, regional variations, and emerging usage. This openness made language learning a lifelong adventure rather than a finite task to complete, which sustained my engagement and enjoyment over time. The English language is particularly dynamic, constantly incorporating new vocabulary from technology, social movements, popular culture, and global influences. Remaining open to these evolutions keeps your language skills current and relevant, rather than frozen in the form you initially learned. Openness also applies to different varieties of English and the diverse ways it's used across cultures and contexts. Rather than judging non-standard usage as incorrect, consider how English adapts to serve different communities and purposes around the world. This inclusive perspective enriches your understanding of the language as a global communication tool rather than a rigid set of rules. As your proficiency increases, continue challenging yourself with new language learning goals rather than settling into comfortable patterns. Perhaps explore specialized vocabulary in areas of personal or professional interest. Develop greater stylistic flexibility. Improve your understanding of subtle connotations and cultural references, or refine aspects of pronunciation that remain challenging. This ongoing growth mindset transforms language learning from a temporary phase into a lifelong enrichment. Creating your own sentences with newly learned vocabulary and grammatical structures is one of the most effective ways to transform passive knowledge into active skill. When you construct sentences yourself, you're practicing the precise mental process required for real communication, selecting appropriate words and arranging them according to grammatical patterns to express your own meaning. I made it a habit to create my own sentences with every new word I learned. Sometimes these sentences were about my daily life. Other times, they were imaginative or humorous. This practice helped me understand how to use words naturally in context, rather than simply memorizing their definitions. Sentence creation also reveals gaps in your understanding that might not be apparent from recognition alone. You might recognize a word when you see or hear it, but discover uncertainty about its precise meaning, grammatical patterns, or collocations, words it naturally pairs with when trying to use it yourself. These revelations guide your further study more effectively than passive review. Starting with simple sentences and gradually increasing complexity allows for manageable progress. Begin with basic subject, verb-object structures, then gradually incorporate modifiers, dependent clauses, varied verb tenses, and more sophisticated constructions. This incremental approach builds confidence while steadily advancing your expressive capabilities. Making your sentences personally meaningful or creative enhances both engagement and retention. Connecting new language to your own experiences, opinions, or imagination creates stronger neural associations than working with generic example sentences. These personal connections make the language more memorable and accessible when you need it for real communication. Watching English TV shows provides an engaging, contextual approach to language learning that combines listening practice with cultural insights and natural language patterns. Television dialogue often reflects everyday conversation more authentically than scripted language learning materials, exposing you to colloquialisms, humor, and emotional expression as used by native speakers. I watched many English TV shows during my learning journey and found them incredibly valuable for developing both language skills and cultural understanding. The visual context, seeing characters' expressions, gestures, and surroundings helped me understand dialogue that might have been incomprehensible in audio only format. Start with shows that have relatively clear dialogue and strong visual storytelling. Sitcoms are often good choices for intermediate learners because they feature everyday situations, use relatively straightforward language, and provide visual cues that support comprehension. As your skills develop, you can explore more complex dramatic series, which often use more sophisticated language and nuanced expression. Using subtitles strategically enhances the learning benefits of watching shows. You might begin with subtitles in your native language to establish basic comprehension, then progress to English subtitles, which help connect spoken and written forms, and eventually challenge yourself to watch without subtitles. Some learners find it helpful to watch the same episode multiple times, using different subtitle options to focus on different aspects of the language. Active engagement with what you're watching significantly increases its learning value. Pause to repeat interesting phrases. Note down unfamiliar expressions to look up later, or try to predict what characters will say next. After watching, summarize the plot in English, speaking or writing. Discuss your reactions to the show or role. Play scenes with a language partner. These activities transform passive watching into active language practice. Thank you for joining me on this journey through effective English learning strategies. I hope these practical approaches and insights will transform your language learning experience from one of struggle to one of joy and discovery. Remember that learning English isn't just about mastering a skill. It's about opening new doors for connection, opportunity, and understanding in our global community. If you've enjoyed this podcast and found it helpful, I'd be so grateful if you'd take a moment to subscribe so you never miss future episodes. Your comments and feedback mean the world to me. They help shape the content I create and let me know which topics resonate most with you. Please hit that like button if this episode was valuable to you, and consider sharing it with friends or family who might also benefit from these English learning strategies. Until next time, keep practicing, stay curious, and remember that every word you learn brings you one step closer to the fluency you desire. I believe in you!